A little bit, a little bit before 9 o'clock this evening, we received a 911 call from an individual at Truth Ministries that there was a person inside who was threatening various individuals with a knife. We responded and were here within minutes. Shortly after arrival on the scene, we located an individual that we believe to be the suspect armed with a knife. He was given multiple verbal commands by our officers to put down the weapon. He refused to do so. Our officers deployed a taser. The individual continued to advance on officers despite being tased. Officers continued to give that individual verbal commands to put down the weapon and to stop proceeding towards officers. He refused to do so, and we engaged this individual. That individual has been transported to the hospital. At this point, I do not know his condition. I want to point out that, once again, we have members of the Spokane Police Department that are forced to confront an individual who's armed, who refuses to comply with orders from our officers. We attempted to use a taser, and that individual continued his aggressive behavior towards our officers, and they took action that they believed was appropriate to protect themselves and the community.
Chief, I know you're not familiar with the distances involved between your officers and the gentleman armed with a knife, but people with knives can close very rapidly, and if they're within 21 feet, if the officers have their guns in their holster, they can't do anything about it, they just get stabbed.
Well, I'm not going to comment on the distances, Jeff, but as I just said, our officers continued to give verbal commands. We deployed a taser. The individual continued aggressive behavior. Once that taser was deployed, the officers believed that the community were at risk, and they engaged the subject.
Chief, if the taser probes make contact properly, that's a lot of pain going through somebody, and we don't know if that happened or not, but I've been tased many times before, and if the probes did make contact and that did not dissuade this individual, it tells me about his determination or his intoxication.
Well, the officers obviously, Jeff, perceived a threat to themselves and the community, and did everything at this point that they could to get the individual to comply with them and continue actions that threaten the safety of the officers and the community.
Talk about the next few hours. Where does the investigation go from this point? What kinds of things you guys are going to be doing from this point now, probably throughout the night?
Sure. So, as is the case in any officer-involved use of force, a shooting in particular, we engage the SIRR Team. So we have engaged the SIRR Team at this point. The Washington State Patrol will be the lead investigators. So you probably will hear maybe one more statement from me either later tonight or tomorrow. And then after that, as you know, the State Patrol will take over the investigation as well as the majority of any communications with the public and the press.
Chief, once this person was no longer a threat to your officers, are you aware if they engaged in any kind of life-saving activity?
They did. They immediately, one of the officers on the scene had first aid equipment in his trunk. He used that first aid equipment. The incident actually happened adjacent to a firehouse, so firefighters, also trained in emergency medicine, quickly deployed from the firehouse and also began to render aid on the individual.
You may be precluded from saying so, but have any of your officers that were here or the command staff that's been to the scene since that time, can anybody tell you definitively there's a knife somewhere out there in that back alley?
I can't comment on the weapon. I believe the officers were confronted with a knife, and that's all I can say at this point.
Were there two officers that responded, and was it in that alleyway between the fire station and the buildings here on the front house?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
That's initial reports.
Initial reports. And there were several officers engaged in the initial response.
Were there several officers engaged in the shooting, or do we know if it was just one officer fired his weapon?
There were several officers that responded and engaged the subject, and That's all I can say at this point.
It's part of the ongoing investigation by the SIRR Team, and as the chief said, State Patrol will be the lead in this investigation, so they will continue the communication after this particular statement, and then probably and most likely another statement from the chief as we learn a little more about this. Any final questions?
How many times was he shot?
Can't comment on that. We don't know at this point.
Well, is standard procedure usually, I mean, I know officers are placed on administrative leave after some things like this. Is that going to be the case, or do we know yet?
Typically, they are placed on administrative leave. I haven't even seen the officers yet, so that's my next stop after this.
So, Chief, I heard one of your fellows write up in the AMR unit with him. Do you know what condition this gentleman is?
We don't know. When I was walking over here, I still didn't know the condition.
And your officers, no one.
None of the officers were injured. That's correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.